At 8:42 a.m., the elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor, and Marcus Adeyemi stepped out, knowing two things with absolute certainty. Someone inside this building wanted him gone, and by the end of the day, he might be in handcuffs. The company lobby below buzzed with the energy of a global giant. Glass walls reflected ambition, screens displayed growth charts that seemed permanently upward. Executives moved with urgency, analysts spoke in numbers, and investors smiled with quiet confidence. Nuellux dynamic was not just successful, it was inevitable. And Marcus was supposed to help protect that inevitability. As Chief Compliance Officer, his job was to ensure that growth never crossed the invisible line between aggressive and illegal. For 5 years, he had been the quiet guardian behind the scenes, reviewing contracts, strengthening internal controls, and asking uncomfortable questions others preferred to ignore. But success has a dangerous side effect. The faster a company grows, the more temptation whispers. It began with a deal that promised transformation. Nuellux Dynamic was preparing a multi-billion-dollar acquisition that could propel the company into the Fortune 500 almost overnight. Analysts called it visionary. Investors called it historic. The board called it urgent. Marcus called it questionable. During a routine review, he noticed discrepancies buried deep within financial disclosures, revenue projections that felt inflated, contracts with ambiguous deliverables, accounting practices that stretched interpretation beyond safety. Nothing overtly illegal, but dangerously close. At an executive strategy meeting, the CFO slid a folder across the table. "We need your sign-off," he said calmly. "This deal is our future." Marcus opened the folder and felt the weight of what was being asked. It was not fraud in plain sight. It was subtle compromise disguised as strategic flexibility. He closed the folder. "I can't approve this," Marcus said. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. A senior executive leaned forward, voice low and measured. "Marcus, growth requires trust. We need alignment, not resistance." Alignment. Marcus understood the language. Alignment meant silence, resistance meant isolation, and isolation came quickly. Meetings occurred without him. Decisions bypassed his office. Performance feedback shifted from praise to criticism. Whispers followed him in hallways. One evening, a colleague pulled him aside. "They're building a case against you," she said quietly. "If this deal fails, you'll be the scapegoat." Marcus went home that night carrying more than stress. He carried the tension between survival and integrity. The easy path required one signature, one compromise, one quiet decision that would protect his position. But Marcus had learned long ago that compromise rarely stays small. Weeks later, the situation escalated beyond corporate politics. Federal investigators arrived unannounced. The acquisition was under scrutiny, and Marcus's name appeared in early reports due to his role in compliance oversight. News outlets ran speculative headlines. Social media filled with assumptions. Colleagues avoided eye contact. The possibility of arrest was no longer theoretical. He sat in his office alone, staring at the city skyline, wondering how integrity had placed him in the center of suspicion. Fear crept in quietly. Not fear of prison, but fear of misrepresentation, fear of being misunderstood, fear that righteousness might not be enough. But Marcus had done something few noticed. He documented everything: emails, audit memos, meeting notes, internal warnings, time-stamped reports outlining concerns. He had preserved truth long before he needed defense. Investigations unfolded slowly, methodically dismantling illusions. Regulators traced decision pathways. Analysts reconstructed internal communications. Financial experts examined projections line by line. The narrative began to shift. Marcus was not the architect of compromise. He was the obstacle to it. The man once viewed as a problem became the reason the company avoided catastrophic legal consequences. Executives resigned quietly. Board members initiated emergency restructuring. Investors demanded leadership reform. And then came the unexpected invitation. The board asked Marcus to step into the role of interim CEO, not because he sought power, but because he had proven he could not be bought by it. The first months were brutal. Nuellux Dynamic faced declining stock prices, shaken employee morale, and skeptical investors. Marcus inherited a company rich in innovation, but fragile in trust. He began with truth. Transparency replaced secrecy. Governance replaced shortcuts. Ethics training became mandatory. Whistleblower protection strengthened. Internal reporting systems modernized. But more importantly, culture shifted. Employees felt safe to speak. Leaders felt accountable. Growth became disciplined rather than reckless. The market responded slowly at first, then decisively. Customer trust returned, investor confidence stabilized, partnerships expanded, innovation flourished without ethical compromise. Years later, Nuellux Dynamic crossed a milestone once nearly achieved through questionable means. It entered the Fortune 500, not through inflated projections but through sustainable, credible growth. At the celebratory announcement, Marcus stood backstage watching employees cheer. The applause echoed through the hall, but his mind drifted back to the elevator moment years earlier. Vindication rarely arrives with fireworks. It arrives quietly, through consistency, patience, and truth. Marcus later addressed the company with a reflection that lingered far beyond the room. "There was a moment when compromise promised protection," he said, "but compromise would have cost us everything we are now celebrating." He paused, scanning the audience. Integrity is expensive in the short term, but compromise is catastrophic in the long term. The applause was not for success. It was for survival with character intact. As Marcus left the stage, he realized something profound. The defining battle was never about corporate politics, federal investigations, or Fortune 500 rankings. It was about a decision made in silence, long before anyone was watching. And the unsettling truth that remains is this: when your defining moment arrives and compromise offers safety, will you risk everything to stand for what is right? Or discover too late what compromise truly costs?